Hare Krishna. So we are on Mahabharat. I think this is actually 59. In the description, it may say 58. I'll change that later, but I believe we're actually on 59, maybe even 60. This goes in order to the way I'm telling the story for the Gurukula. So I think in the Gurukula, we've come to its number 60. So I'm going to make sure those two things are aligned. Okay, so we left off the gambling match. This is part 3. This version is the unedited version. So it may not be something you want to have very young children to listen to. It can be a little bit, they wouldn't understand it. So this is, I would like to say, this is for those of us who are a little older. So, Shakuni has interrupted Vidura. He doesn't want Yudhishthir to hear what Vidura is saying. So he interrupts Vidura and goes to addresses Yudhishthir. Says, Yudhishthir, you're the king. This is up to you. Are you your own man or not? Shakuni is very good at getting into the psychology of another person's mind and manipulating. Yudhishthir is completely befuddled by Shakuni's digging into his ego, digging into his psyche. And no one has ever seen Yudhishthir like this before. Yudhishthir has always been has always in the past had his senses under control, his emotions under control. He's always been deliberate in his actions and in his speech. No one has ever seen Yudhishthir be so irrational and completely overcome by this addiction. Yudhishthir is now, as I mentioned in the last version, he begins to bet people. Before he was betting things, property, wealth, land. And then from property to land, he went to people. He starts betting off his servants, his assistants. He just begins indiscriminately betting people off. So now he's lost essentially everything. And Shakuni says, well, my dear King Yudhishthir, I have everything. But what about your brothers? Everyone in the assembly. Remember, the assembly is packed with people. Bhishma, Karna, Dushashan, Duryodhana, Dronacharya, Kripacharya, and all these kings that Duryodhana has invited. Everyone, there's a quick intake of breath. I mean, this is becoming a little bit too far. Now, mind you, all the people that are invited here, they're all allies, friends, and part of Duryodhana's group. So up until this point, they were, laughing and having a grand old time watching Duryodhana and Shakuni essentially rob the Pandavas and Yudhishthir. But when it comes to this point, people are starting to get a little anxious because it's going in a realm that people had not really expected. In Yudhishthir, the Mahabharata describes that he's acting like someone who is drunk on power, drunk on the situation at hand. He's just completely lost all sense. And Yudhishthir says, of course, I have the highly educated, powerful, diplomatic Nakul. I wager him. I put him as a stake. Shakuni takes the dice, rolls the dice. Yudhishthir loses Nakul. Shakuni says, okay, now what? Again, he's goading Yudhishthir. Yudhishthir says, Sahadev. The extraordinarily gifted Sahadev, who knows all about the Vedas, all about the teachings of Dharma. I wager Sahadev. Shakuni takes his dice, rolls his dice, Sahadev is lost. Now the Pandavas, they're looking at Yudhishthir like, dude, what are you doing? But they don't say anything. If you remember, the Pandavas have this, they were brought up in this way, and they have this, by Kunti Devi, and they have this bond that they do not contradict one another in public. They have set up their entire life so that there is always, no matter what, there's always unity between the five. Because without that unity, they would destroy one another. The Pandavas are indestructible from outside forces, but the moment they turn on one another, it all comes to pieces. So Sahadev and Nakul, they turn to Yudhishthir, and they see that Yudhishthir has completely lost his senses. He's gone. He's just completely manipulated and driven by this gambling match. Bhima is furious. He wants to say something, and Arjuna is actually holding Bhima back. He's trying to calm Bhima down. Bhima's, get off of me. But he's not verbally saying anything to Yudhishthir, but he is becoming incensed. In fact, in the description of the Mahabharata doesn't often give a lot of description of how the individuals are, reacting to these things. But except for in two occasions, two exceptions, Yudhishthir and Bhima. It describes Yudhishthir as being completely beside himself, despondent, depressed, clueless, and just off his mind. And it describes Bhima as being furious, as standing up, sitting down, wanting to speak, but not speaking, having to be held back by Arjuna. So in describing Bhima and Yudhishthir, the Mahabharata vividly describes how they're reacting, their reactions to this whole situation. So Arjuna is trying to hold Bhima back, and Bhima is incensed. Shakuni, he's still manipulating. All this while, Bhishma, Drona, Kripacharya, they are just silent. Dhritarashtra is continually turning to his assistant. He's saying, what's being wagered now? And the assistant tells him, oh, Yudhishthira just wagered Nakul. Dhritarashtra, have we won? Have we won? He gets more and more excited when he hears how Shakuni is winning all of these things from the Pandavas. So Dhritarashtra turns to his assistant and says, what's happening now? What's going on? What's being wagered now? And the assistant says, right now, Yudhishthira has lost Nakul and Sahadev. And Dhritarashtra is in ecstasy to hear this. Karna is sitting next to Duryodhana and Dushashan and the brothers around the gambling arena, the gambling setup. And Karna is just smiling. He is enjoying this no end. Shakuni turns to Yudhishthira and says, my dear Yudhishthira, I understand you don't want to wager Bhim and Arjun because we all know that, Nakul and Sahadev, you have no affection for them. They're the sons of Madri, so I can understand you don't mind wagering them, losing them to being slaves. You don't mind if they're slaves. But I understand that you don't want to wager Arjun and Bhim because they're actually your brothers. You have your favorite to them. You have a soft spot for them. You don't consider Nakul and Sahadev your real brothers. I understand this. So you don't worry about wagering your brother. I understand this sibling rivalry you have. This is Shakuni actually using psychology to goad you. And everyone can see what Shakuni is doing except for Yudhishthira. Yudhishthira has lost his mind. Yudhishthira, he takes the bait. He says, what do you mean? There is no favoritism among the five brothers. We stand as one, all for one and one for all. The five musketeers going on here. Completely manipulated by Shakuni. Yudhishthira says, everyone knows that we always stand as one. Just like the five fingers of a hand. When we come together, we all stand as one. We are powerful and cannot be destroyed. I wager you Arjun. Just what Shakuni wanted. Takes his dice, throws the dice. Yudhishthira loses Arjun. Arjun is taken aback and is shocked. Bhima is furious. But still Arjun is holding back Bhima. Dhritarashtra turns to his assistant. What happened? What happened? The assistant says, Yudhishthira just wagered Arjun. And Dhritarashtra, have we won? Have we won? Did we win Arjun? And the assistant, well, evidently, yes. Yudhishthira has lost. Yudhishthira says, Bhima, the most powerful Bhima. Shakuni says, very well. Rolls the dice. Yudhishthira loses. Shakuni says, you lost your 5 brothers. What more do you have? You've given up. You've sold them into slavery. You've lost them to slavery. I understand if you want to stop now because you want to protect yourself. After all, self-preservation is the first law of nature. He doesn't use that term, but he says one's most dear possession is one's own body. So I understand if you do not want to wager your own body in this game of dice. You don't mind wagering your brothers because they don't mean so much to you, but I understand we can stop now. Again, Shakuni manipulating Yudhishthira. Yudhishthira, he's lost it. He's long since lost his even common sense, let alone any kind of understanding of dharma and the principles of religion. That's, forget it. It's all said and done now. Yudhishthira, completely driven by ego. Of course, I'll wager myself. There's a hush in the entire assembly. Even all those who came, invited by Duryodhana, the other gamblers who were invited by Duryodhana, the kings who are witnessing this, they are all beginning to think this has gone too far. Enough is enough. It's one thing taking their wealth, but this is unacceptable. But no one's saying anything. No one is saying anything. What everyone does hear is in the background, Dhritarashtra whispering to his assistant, what's going on? What's going on? And the assistant telling him, well, it looks like Yudhishthira is about to wager himself. Shakuni throws the dice. Yudhishthira has lost himself. Dhritarashtra turns to his assistant. What happened? Did we win? Did we win? Yudhishthira has lost himself. Dhritarashtra is smiling. Karna is smiling. I mean, he is, at this point, he's almost laughing. His smile is so broad. He's practically laughing. The Duryodhana, excited, happy, clapping Shakuni on the back, congratulating Shakuni for what he's done. The other 100 brothers, overjoyed. The other kings, however, they are just shocked. No one knows what to think of this. Bhishma, Drona, Kripa, they are silent. They're looking down. They're not saying anything. Shakuni says, calm down. He tells Duryodhana, calm down. This is not yet over. He says, so, my dear Yudhishthira, you've lost everything. However, you do have a jewel. You're actually very deceitful. You're not being honest. Now, Yudhishthira is always known. His reputation is a person who has never told a lie. So now Shakuni is poking at this reputation of Yudhishthira's, poking at his pride, his ego on this, his fame of being known for having never told a lie. Shakuni says, actually, you have told a lie. Yudhishthira is affronted. What do you mean? I've never told a lie. I always speak the truth. I always speak honesty in everything that I do. What do you mean I've told a lie? What lie? What are you talking about? Shakuni says, your most valuable jewel, your most valuable possession. Yudhishthira says, what do you mean? Shakuni says, Draupadi. Silence. Even Dhritarashtra, having heard that this is being put on the table, so to speak, Draupadi, not it, she is being put on the table. He's silent. Everyone is silent. They think this can't be actually happening. Vidura is shaking his head. Yudhishthira, he's oblivious. He's completely driven by ego, pride, the addiction of, he's completely lost his mind. He says, sure, Draupadi. Shakuni, wicked smile, rolls the dice. Draupadi is lost. Duryodhana, aha, we've got Draupadi, he exclaims. Dhritarashtra turns to his assistant. What's happened? The assistant says, Yudhishthira just wagered Draupadi. Draupadi has been lost. Duryodhana is laughing. Karna is laughing. The 100 brothers are laughing. The kings who come to witness this, they're silent. They're still not saying anything, but they've come to the conclusion this has gone too far. Bhishma, Drona, Kripacharya not saying anything. Vidura is crying at this point, but no one has intervened. Duryodhana turns to Pratikami. Pratikami is Duryodhana's charioteer. Duryodhana turns to Pratikami's charioteer and says, go, bring Draupadi here. Pratikami, he's a charioteer. He is all of a sudden caught in the middle of the most infamous moment in all of history. He takes the instruction. He goes to the palace of the Pandavas. He enters Draupadi's chamber. The maids of Draupadi try to, what are you doing here? Pratikami says, I'm here under the order of Duryodhana. They can't stop him from entering the chamber. They try to, they can't. He enters the chamber with Draupadi. Draupadi is, at this point, she is modestly dressed. She is in her menstrual cycle. The maids usher in Pratikami. Pratikami is mortified. He can't even look at Draupadi in the eye. And looking down, he says, my dear queen. And he tells everything that's happened in the court. And he says, my dear queen, Duryodhana sent me to come and get you. Draupadi, cool, calm, collected, she says, very well. After hearing the entire story of what's happened at the gambling match, okay. Go and ask my husband, Yudhishthir, did he gamble himself first or me? Pratikami is happy to be let off the hook. He does not want to be in this situation. He turns around, he runs back to the court, and he turns to Yudhishthir. He ignores Duryodhana. He's afraid of Duryodhana. He turns to Yudhishthir, and he says, my dear Yudhishthir, Draupadi told me to ask you whether you lost yourself first in the game of dice, or did you lose her? Who did you lose first? Yudhishthir is not saying anything. Bhima is livid. Arjun is lost. Arjun has no idea what's going on. He's also described as being completely confused, but he's trying to restrain Bhima from just tearing the roof off this place. Bhima stands up, and he's about to speak. Karna interrupts. Duryodhana interrupts. He says, wait a minute. This is not Draupadi's place to come ask who did what with whom. She has been lost in the game of dice. Pratikami, you go back to her and you tell her to get herself in this court right now. There is Bhishma, no one's saying anything. Arjun is trying to restrain Bhima. Bhima is about to blow his top. He has already blown his top. Yudhishthira is sitting there in silence, just looking down, completely bereft of his senses. Not a lot is described about how Yudhishthira is handling this, but he's not saying anything. Pratikami is not hearing anything from Yudhishthira. His boss, Duryodhana, is telling him to go back to get Draupadi. I mean, what is he going to do? He's not going to. He turns around and he walks back to the Draupadi's palace. At this point, Pratikami is crying. He has no idea what to do. And he says, my dear queen, Yudhishthira was silent. He didn't answer the question. Duryodhana has sent me back here to, he did not use Duryodhana's words. He says, he sent me back here to ask you to come to the assembly. Draupadi, cool, calm and collected, she says, okay. So my husbands aren't speaking. Put the same question to Bhishma, Drona, and the elders of the court. Ask them, did Yudhishthira gamble himself away first or me? Go ask them and bring me back the reply. Pratikami knows this is going from bad to worse because he knows what's going on. He was there in the court. He knows what's going on there. He knows that Bhishma, Drona, Kripa, they're not going to say anything. He knows they're not going to say anything. He knows Dhritarashtra is excited about this as anyone. So there's nothing to be had from Dhritarashtra. He knows what the answer is. But he is happy not to be in the palace, to be away from having to be the messenger to Draupadi. He knows Yudhishthira is useless. In a way, he's kind of hoping that Bhima takes control of the situation, because Bhima is actually the only one that can take control of the situation. He sees everything as hopeless. He goes back to the court. And he doesn't go to Duryodhan because he knows it's pointless. He doesn't go to Yudhishthira. He goes to Bhishma. And he says, my dear Bhishma, Draupadi is asked whether Yudhishthira has won. Did Yudhishthira lose himself first or Draupadi? Duryodhan interrupts. He says, Pratikami, you work for me. You do what I tell you to do. Enough of this. Excuse me. Just deal with this. Technology. Enough of this. You do what I tell you to do. Go bring, actually, Pratikami, forget it. Dushasan, go bring Draupadi here. Go bring Draupadi here. Dushasan is described as being inebriated, drunk. With his drunken self, he stumbles to the palace of Draupadi. He bursts into her palace, into her chamber. She's improperly dressed. She now realizes the severity of the situation. Dushasan says, you, come with me. Draupadi tries to reason with him. She says, hold on a second. You should see me as your sister. What would you do if someone was treating your sister as you were treating me? Whether or not Yudhishthira lost himself before betting me, that's irrelevant. How would you think of the person who is treating your sister the way you and others are trying to treat me? Dushasan doesn't care. He is completely overcome by lust and he doesn't care. His character is so low, he is not even paying attention. He says, you come with me, and you come with me now. Draupadi realizes there's no reasoning with him. She starts to run towards the apartments of the other queens, of the other ladies. And Dushasan, realizing that's the last thing he wants to happen, he chases after Draupadi and he grabs her by the hair. He grabs her by the hair and he begins dragging her towards the palace. Now, at this point, Draupadi is screaming, trying to get him to stop, but also trying to call for help. None of the maids, none of her servants in the palace lift a finger. And in a way, it is Dushasan. The guy Dushasan is I believe he's classified as a Mahabharati, as a powerful warrior in his own right. No one can really stand up to Dushasan. She's screaming. She's dressed in a manner, she's on her period, so she's dressed comfortably, but not in a way to be, in other words, her clothes are falling off. He doesn't care. He's dragging Draupadi to the court. When they arrive there, at this point, remember all those kings that up to this point are not saying anything? They start to get restless. They do not openly oppose what's happening, but they are now talking to each other. What is going on here? This is absolutely insane. But no one is saying anything. to Duryodhana, and no one is even getting up to leave. They're still sitting there. Bhishma, Drona, Kripacharya, silent, looking down. Dhritarashtra turns to his assistant. What's going on? What's going on? The assistant is having a hard time telling Dhritarashtra what he's seeing. He's struggling. Mahabharata describes this. He is struggling to tell Dhritarashtra what is being carried out. Yudhishthira looking at the ground, Arjuna looking at the ground, Bhima is furious. He stands up and he lets loose. He says, "How dare you? How dare you?" And now he is not talking to Dushasana. Bhima is talking to Yudhishthira. And when Bhima talks to Yudhishthira, the entire court goes silent. Bhima turns, because no one's ever seen this before. No one has ever seen the five Pandavas argue amongst themselves. No one has ever seen it. People have seen Bhima upset. That's the number of times Bhima has been upset about something is a dime a dozen. But no one has ever seen it be focused to Yudhishthira. Bhima turns on Yudhishthira. He's standing up over Yudhishthira. Bhima is huge. He's described as being half the times, 50% taller than any of his brothers. So Bhima is enormous, and he's just as wide in the chest. He is towering over the seated Yudhishthira. Arjuna is trying to calm him down. Bhima shakes off, Arjuna is trying to calm him down. Bhima shakes off Arjuna as if he's a leaf. And that's saying something because Arjuna himself is no leaf. He's standing over Yudhishthira and he's saying, "How dare you? Look what you've done." He goes off on Yudhishthira. He says, "You call yourself Dharmaraj, or people call you Dharmaraj, and you're sitting here watching this happen. You are the cause of this happening." Bhima lets loose on Yudhishthira. No one has seen this ever. No one has seen anyone let loose on Yudhishthira, let alone any of the brothers, let alone Bhima in public in this manner. Bhima blows his top. He says, "Sahadev." He shouts at Sahadev. Sahadev and Nakula, they are crying at this point. Bhima shouts at Sahadev. Sahadev is startled. He says, "Sahadev, go bring fire. I'm going to burn Yudhishthira's hands." People are completely what's going on? I mean, this is absolute madness. This has gone beyond. No one could ever have imagined that this is what's going to take place at this gambling match. Bhima says, "Now go to Sahadev, bring fire. I'm going to burn Yudhishthira's hands for what he has caused here." Sahadev is immobile. He's like a deer in headlights. He has no idea what's going on, what to do. He's not going to bring fire to burn Yudhishthira's hands. At the same time, Bhima's telling him Bhima's about to burn his own hands if he doesn't do it. Sahadev is his mind is just completely blown a fuse. One person recognizes that this is really, forget about getting out of hand. This is gone out of hand. Vikarna. Vikarna is one of the younger brothers of Duryodhana. He stands up and he says, and he turns to his father, Dhritarashtra, Bhishma, and others. He says, "You have got to put a stop to this. Do you not see? Do you not hear what is going on here? This is absolutely unacceptable." Bhima is threatening to burn the hands of his own brother. What to speak of what he's going to do to Duryodhana, Dushasana, and everyone else sitting here. Bhima can kill everyone in this court. If you not see, do you not hear what he's talking? Bhima at this point can destroy the entire court, the entire Kuru family. Look at his face. Hear how he's talking. Bhima was red. He was furious. He threw off Arjuna like Arjuna was a paper towel. Vikarna says, you have to stop this. He's addressing the elders, Bhishma, Drona, Dhritarashtra, his own father. You have got to put an end to this. Karna stands up. He says, hey, who do you think you are? He's talking to Vikarna. He says, you are the youngest, one of the younger brothers. I'm not quite sure if he was the youngest, but he was certainly one of the younger brothers. He says, you're the younger brother. You don't speak unless you're spoken to. Sit down and be quiet, Karna says to Vikarna. You can see here Karna saying that no one is speaking in objection to this, because what's going on here is right. Yudhishthir, according to the rules of gambling, he's lost all rights in this arena. That's why no one is objecting. That's not why no one's objecting. Who knows why? I mean, you read the Mahabharata, it's hard to understand why Nina was not objecting to this. But anyways, that's Karna's rationale. No one is objecting to this. This was happen fair and square. Sit down and shut up. You speak when your older brother asks you to speak. Sit down and shut up. Take an example from the Pandavas. They're quiet. They're not talking without Yudhishthir telling them to. You don't talk without Duryodhana telling you. Sit down and be quiet. Vikarna turns to the elders. No one's trying to bring sense to Duryodhana, Shakuni, Karna. There's no point talking to them. Everyone is looking to Dhritarashtra, Bhishma, and Drona, Kripacharya. And they're sitting there, shaking their heads, not saying anything. Vikarna sits down. Karna turns to Dushasana. And he says, these 5 Pandavas, they're slaves. Take their cloth. All of this jewels, all of these crowns and rings and necklaces and silk clothes, they all belong to us. Take it. Give it up. Bhima, Arjun, Yudhishthir, they start taking off their crowns, taking off their rings, taking off their necklaces, all the jewels, their silk embroidered chatters. They take them off. They keep their dhotis, but all they put in a heap there in front of Dushasana, Karna, Duryodhana. Meanwhile, Draupadi is in a bundle sitting on the floor crying in this situation. Karna turns to Dushasana and he points to Draupadi. Her clothes, they belong to us. Take her clothes. That was more than anyone had ever, that was more than anyone could deal with. Vidura stood up and he says, stop, enough. He ignores Duryodhana and Karna. Nothing to be had there. He turns to Dhritarashtra. My dear king, are you going to allow this to happen? Vidura goes through, he starts to, many different arguments he gives. Dharma, all the arguments that Vidura gives falls on deaf ears. Dhritarashtra is not hearing any of it. He's just with a blank face, just sitting there. Vidura turns to Bhishma, Drona, and Kripa. He says, are you going to allow this to happen? You've got to stop this. You have to intervene. The Pandavas are sitting there. They've just heard this. Vidura is speaking. No one's listening to Vidura. Dushasana moves towards Draupadi, grabs her sari. Bhima loses it for the umpteenth time. Bhima, everyone's ignored Vidura. Bhima, seeing that Vidura had no ability to stop this from happening, Bhima again blows his top. He says, Dushasana, don't you dare touch her. Karna turns to Bhima. Bhima, you're a slave. Sit down, shut up. Bhima ignores Karna. Interestingly enough, Duryodhana is seated silently. He's smiling, But Duryodhana is such a coward. He allows everybody else to do all the dirty work, right? He's not saying anything. He's letting Karna, Dushashan do all the dirty work and giving, but he's sitting there smiling and laughing and nodding at all of this and just thoroughly enjoying what's happening. Bhima turns again. He ignores Karna. He says, Dushashan, don't you dare lay your hands on her. Dushashan is torn. He's looking at Karna. He's looking at Duryodhana. He's looking at Bhima. He's scared to death. He's always been scared to death of Bhima. Karna says, take her clothes. They belong to us. Bhima says, don't you dare. Dushashan grabs Draupadi's sari and begins to try to disrobe her. Bhima, the Pandavas, the only description we hear from the Mahabharata about the other Pandavas is they're sitting down, staring at the floor, doing nothing. The kings in the court are shocked, not saying anything, not doing anything. Bhishma, Kripacharya, Dronacharya are looking down, doing nothing. Dhritarashtra is eagerly listening from his assistant, who is crying and with great difficulty trying to describe what's happening in the court. And Dhritarashtra is lapping it up. He's just enjoying, described by the Mahabharata, he's enjoying how this is taking place. Draupadi is trying to hang on to her sari. She realizes she's not going to win a battle with Dushasana, a physical battle of strength. She immediately prays to Krishna. It's described, Krishna hears Draupadi's prayer in Dvaraka and immediately arrives there. Unknown to, no one can see Krishna. Mahabharata describes no one can see Krishna. He arrives there and begins to play out reams of sari as Dushasana is pulling. And everyone is, in a way, mesmerized by what's happening here, both by disbelief and sheer shock, but also by the fact that Dushasana is pulling this sari, and it's getting longer and longer, and the pile is getting higher and higher and higher. And Draupadi is sitting there, is being turned around. The sari is coming off of her, but it's just continuing to come off her as she is chanting Krishna Stotra, prayers to Krishna. The Pandavas are dumbstruck. Bhima is dumbstruck. He doesn't know what to say, how to say anything, the fact that this is happening. And Dushasana is just pulling and pulling and pulling. And there is no end. He's pulling so much that he's becoming physically tired and exhausted from pulling all of this sari. He becomes so exhausted that he just finally just collapses himself on this heap, a mound is described, a mound of silk, multicolored fabric that has come from Draupadi. Vidura, he sees this, and he is the only one who cottons on that this is Krishna. When Dushasana falls on the heap of sari, completely exhausted, Vidura stands up and he turns to Dhritarashtra. He speaks directly to Dhritarashtra. He says, do you see? Do you understand? Well, not see. Dhritarashtra was blind. But he says, do you know what has just happened here? Your son has tried to disrobe Draupadi. And somehow or other, by the mercy of Krishna, this has not happened. She has not been disrobed. She's still fully clothed. Dushasana has failed. Your sons have failed in disrobing Draupadi. This is a second chance. You still have time to stop this from going any further. Take this second chance. Take this lifeline and disperse, nullify everything that has gone on here. Send the Pandavas, give everything back to the Pandavas, send them back to Indraprastha, because this is the last chance you're gonna get to make this right. Draupadi has not been disrobed. This is a lifeline. This is a second chance. It's not going to come again. Take this opportunity to undo it. If you do it now, you give everything back, you send them back to Indraprastha now, you might get away with saving your sons' lives. This is your last chance. Dhritarashtra's, no, absolutely not. Bhima, Yudhishthira is useless at this point. Arjun is useless. Nakula and Sahadeva are useless. Bhima is standing and he's listening to Vidura. Everyone's listening to Vidura, what Vidura is saying. Dhritarashtra is not listening. Dhritarashtra begins to give one of his Bhagavatam classes. Fate. What can we do? This is all in the hands of the Supreme. What do we know what the plan is of fate and destiny? This is all, we just have to let it play out the way it's supposed to play out. Bhima is like, dude, really? Again, Bhima takes up everything and he says, you know what? Enough. Dushasana, I swear to God. Sorry, those are my words. Bhima says, I swear, I promise, I'm going to rip your arm off of your body, out of its socket. I'm going to tear open your chest and I'm going to drink your blood for dare touching my wife. How dare you do what you've just done? Karna stands up. Sorry. What time is it? I wanted to go a bit further than this, but it's now been 40 minutes. All right, well, let's continue. Where were we? Bhima vows to, I'll tear your arm out of your socket. I'm going to tear open your chest. I'm going to drink your blood. Vidura turns to Dhritarashtra and says, you see? You see? This is what's happening. The Pandavas are going to destroy your family. But forget about the Pandavas, Vidura says. What we see here now is that the Pandavas, if you want to consider them as slaves, so be it. But Draupadi is not. Draupadi asked the question. This is Vidura speaking. Now he's speaking to everyone in the assembly, because Dhritarashtra is not listening. He's talking about fate and destiny. He's giving a Bhagavatam class. Vidura, he turns to everyone, because also, a very important thing, the assembly of kings, now they found their voice. And now for the first time, after Krishna came to the rescue, of course, for the first time now, people in the audience are starting to say, you know what, Duryodhana, enough is enough. They're objecting. They're starting to vocally express their objection. Vidura is saying, and he speaks to everyone, now that finally, after all of this, after Krishna has saved the day, mind you, everyone has an opinion. Vidura takes on that. He says, okay, well, now the momentum is in finally the people are starting to speak up, at least the assembled kings. He presses the point. He says, Draupadi is not a slave. We all heard how this happened. We all know how this happened. Yudhishthira lost himself before he wagered Draupadi. Vidura realizes that he's surrounded by people who are, for lack of a better term, they're lecherous abusers. His mind is, he's trying to save Draupadi. You can't save Yudhishthira's a lost cause. Bhima's about to just kill everybody. Nakula and Sahadeva are blown out of their own senses. Arjuna the Mahabharata does describe Arjuna as angry and crying, but also just not doing anything. Vidura's intent is to save Draupadi. And he says, Draupadi is not a slave. If you want to say the Pandavas are slaves, very, very well. Yudhishthira, he bet Nakul, Sahadev, Arjun, and Bhima in that order. So, all right, if the four of them are going to be slaves, take them. They're slaves. Yudhishthira has a right to wager himself, right? He can say, I bet myself, I'll be a slave. He lost himself. Okay, Yudhishthira is a slave. take all of their property. They're all slaves. Do what you want. Draupadi is not. You cannot touch Draupadi. Draupadi is under the protection of the Kuru dynasty. She married into the Kuru dynasty. She's under the protection of the throne. She's not a property that can be shared and oh, by the way, and this is actually two important points. It was Vidura, Vikarna, I didn't mention this in Vikarna's speech, and Bhima. These are the three people who were the only ones who said that Draupadi is not property that can be wagered in a game of dice. That people aren't, you can't wager people in a game of dice. It was Vikarna said that in his speech. Vidura said that, he's saying it now, and Bhima said that as well. So right now Vidura is saying you cannot, first of all, she's a person. You can't wager a person. All right? Yudhishthira did it. He wagered his brothers. If you want to take them, fine. Draupadi married into the Kuru dynasty. She is under the protection of the Kuru throne. Not only that, Yudhishthira lost himself before he lost her. Draupadi is not part of this whole gambling issue. I think I may have to stop here. Yeah, we'll end here and continue next Saturday because there's a lot more going on, and I have another Gurukul class to attend to at the moment. So we'll end there, and remember, this is not the Disney version. So the Disney version I'll also upload to our channel, and I'll write Disney version or rated G for the general audience, and I'll basically breeze through this section of the story because we don't want our young, 5-6-year-old students who also listen to Mahabharata avidly. This will forgo the details of this particular episode. So we'll continue this next Saturday. Hare Krishna.